all aspects of pesticides with them. We've been running for about 35 years. We are part of a wider international organization. There are sort of PANs dotted all over the world, in all the continents of the world. We as an organization, we work internationally. We've got a very large project working with African cotton growers to help them convert to growing organic cotton. So they're using less pesticides and less resources in general. We work nationally. We also worked up until sort of, beginning of the year at the EU level, and we do a lot of local work. And we do a range of different things. So I'm very involved in policy, and policy is the big issue at the moment. We do a lot of work with the public, providing information about pesticides, the effects of pesticides, the harms of pesticides, how to avoid pesticides, etc. And we try and offer practical solutions. So on our website, you'll find, for example, a guide to gardening without pesticides, and there are a whole range of other things. There are alternatives to amenity pesticides, etc. So our work in the UK, there really are some key policy issues at the moment, which I shall talk about later. We've been involved in all the recent neonicotinoid issues. I mean, we were one of the first organisations to raise the alarm about the impact that neonicotinoids would have on bees and pollinators more widely. So been very involved in that. We've always been concerned about pesticides in food. Pesticides aren't just used to grow our food, but they turn up as residues on our food. So we publish an annual report looking at what pesticides are on what foods. We run quite a big campaign, and I shall talk about that a bit later on as well. Our Pesticide Free Towns campaign, which is trying to end the use of non-agricultural pesticides in our homes and gardens. And of course, we focus on farming. So many of you will know this already, or you may not. So what are pesticides? Well, simply put, pesticides are poisons, and they are things that are designed to kill living organisms. That is their job, that is their role, and that is what they do. They are the only substance that is put directly into our environment with the express purpose of killing things. And yes, you look up the definition of poison, and pesticides covers it. Usually when we talk about pesticides, people immediately assume it's insecticides, but pesticides is actually the umbrella term for all the sides that kill things. So insecticides kill insects, herbicides kill plants, fungicides, fungi, molluscicides, slugs, etc., etc. So when I'm talking about pesticides, I am referring to all the family of sides that are used to kill things. Agriculture is far and away the largest user of pesticides in the UK and globally. So in the UK, about 94% of all the pesticides used are used in agriculture. Amenity is the second largest with 5%. When I talk about amenity, I mean on our streets, pavements, parks, playgrounds, schools, but also things like golf courses. So anywhere that's not agricultural, but also anywhere that's not someone's home and garden. And the home and garden or allotment use accounts for about 1% of the rest of the use. That little picture you can see there is from some amenity use, and it's where glyphosate has been sprayed around the bottoms of trees to get rid of weeds, the sort of the brown bit there and the brown bits up the side. So that's amenity pesticide use. So why should we be worried about the use of pesticides? Well, as I said, they're poisons, and they're put into the environment to kill living organisms. And popular to what maybe the pesticide industry and others would have you believe, they're not targeted. They do kill the things that are regarded as pests, but they also have huge impacts on non-target organisms as well. And there is not one single pesticide that will only kill the one thing that it's aimed at. So they have wide-ranging effects on non-target species. So since the 1970s, I must state, of course, not all of this is solely due to pesticides, but a combination of factors. But there is incontrovertible evidence that pesticides play a major role in these declines. So we've lost 50% of our farmland bird species since the 1970s, and they keep decreasing. It's an ongoing problem. There have been reports of a 75% decrease in insect abundance in various places, and the impact on loss of insects has a knock-on effect. Probably skip to that. So huge impacts on honey and wild bees, which has been all over the news. It's not just neonicotinoids that are killing our pollinators, but a whole range of other pesticides, including fungicides and herbicides, the combinations of those, and the loss of sort of foraging and habitat and food for such things. Plummeting hedgehog numbers. Interesting that there's been a huge increase in slug pellets and slug killing, and obviously it's coupled up with habitat loss as well, but they're losing their food, the numbers are plummeting. We've lost 95% or more of our wildflower meadows since the end of the Second World War. And this is just the big ones. We're also seeing reductions in bats, toads, frogs, voles, etc., etc. And I'm sure you know that probably better than me as you're part of the wildlife trusts. So it's not just biodiversity where we're seeing impacts. These are some global facts about agriculture. So more than 10 million agricultural workers, so the people that are growing our food, are poisoned each year. And the problems are more pronounced in developing countries where there is much laxer regulation. And they really bear the brunt of the pesticide problem. So 1 million hospitalized, 300,000 deaths annually as a direct result of pesticide exposure. That's 850 people every single day of the year that are dying as a result of being exposed to pesticides. That seems like a lot to me. And then suicides. A third of the global total of suicides are as a result of having access to or using pesticides. Recent study by the University of Edinburgh has shown that if we just banned one particular herbicide, paraquat, which we don't use in the EU, although to our shame we make it in the UK and export it to other countries, if we could ban that one herbicide, we could halve the number of suicides every single year globally. So aren't we protected from pesticides? Yes, pesticides are arguably the most highly regulated chemicals in the world. And that's because they are so potentially harmful. But are those regulations really up to scratch? My opinion, our opinion at PanGWT is no, they're not. So for many years, we have been under EU regulatory system for pesticides, which is far from perfect, but probably the best in the world that we have at the moment. But of course, we've left the EU, so we're no longer going to be following their rules. There are huge gaps in regulation. The approvals process, the risk assessment for chemicals is always a one step behind developments in science. That's just the nature of things. That's how things work. And we saw that with the bee-toxic neonicotinoids, worked in a completely different way. The risk assessment for their approval, well, it didn't even take those things into account. And so therefore we couldn't properly evaluate the effect and impact it was going to have once it was used out in the real world scenario. So then what we saw was the massive bee die-offs, the massive problems that we did see, and that's resulted in a revamp of the regulatory system. But the problem with pesticides is they keep advancing, and our regulatory system always plays catch up. And it's not until a massive problem has been identified that there is any action. One of the big problems with pesticides is the huge power that pesticide companies have and the influence they wield on our politicians, our decision makers, and our regulators. Not to mention the issue of revolving doors, whereby a regulator works for a pesticide industry and vice versa. So we really have 4 big companies that control the majority of pesticide sales, pesticide research, etc., in the world. And it's these four here with there's a couple of other subsidiaries like ChemChina, etc. But there's already these four conglomerates that do it. You might recognize some of the names there. Yeah, their influence is huge, but they also control the seed market. They're looking at all the GM stuff, and they wield huge power with government. So their influence is heavy. They lobby to avoid bans on pesticides. They lobby to change the interpretation of science is probably the least libelous way I can put it, etc. And then, particularly in the UK, we have too much reliance on voluntary measures. There is this ideological belief that we can allow the industry to regulate itself, and that will be effective. And I'm afraid over the years, all too often we've seen that, that just doesn't work. So where do we go now that we've left the EU? Well, there are threats, and I'll start with the threats, and then we'll move on to the slightly better news. Really, back in 2016, once we'd had the referendum result, we started thinking, well, what could this possibly mean? What's this going to mean for pesticide regulation or legislation in the UK? And knowing what the UK is like, or has been historically, not just this government, all the governments preceding it, of whichever colour rosette they choose to wear, they have not been good on pesticides. It's just how they work. So we're very concerned that there might be rollbacks of legislation and standards. Weakening the laws that are in place in the EU is a very real threat. Coupled with that is the potential for the return of banned pesticides. We've already seen an emergency derogation for a banned neonicotinoid that was given in January. I don't think that's linked directly with the EU, but it is an inkling of what might be to come in future. We have, for many years, the UK was opposed to the neonicotinoid ban, although it did a bit of a U-turn. So will they come back? Will things like paraquat come back, which there have been calls to do? There are a whole range of things that have been banned by the EU for environmental or human health reasons that it's possible will return now we're no longer in the EU. More pesticides in our food. Again, we sit under this as a bit of EU legislation about maximum residue levels. That's the maximum amount of a pesticide that can remain on a piece of food, produce, fruit, veg, whatever it happens to be, for you to buy and consume. Pesticides in our food is an issue. The majority of the fruit and veg that we buy here has one or more pesticide residues on it, unless it's organic. And we're looking to strike up trade deals and trade agreements, and a lot of those are with countries that don't have as strong a regulatory system as the EU does. So we run a risk of importing foods that have higher levels of pesticides on. And that has a corollary to it, in that if we're importing food from other countries where they're allowed to use pesticides that we don't use, or higher quantities of pesticides that we don't use, our farmers are then at a disadvantage. And so we could see calls again for our farmers to be able to level up the playing field and use the same pesticides or the same amount of pesticides, which leads back to the return of the banned pesticides issue. So far, the National Farmers Union has stood firmly against any kind of reduction in standards for trade agreements, but it remains to be seen whether that will remain the case. The loss of the precautionary principle you can see the precautionary principle down there on the right of the screen. And this is a really, really important thing, and particularly when it comes to pesticides. When an activity raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken, even if some cause and effect relationships are not fully established scientifically. So we err on the side of caution. If we think there's a problem, we shouldn't go ahead and use things. The EU system we're under for the approval of pesticides is a sort of hazard-based system, which is much more precautionary. It basically says if a pesticide has some kind of intrinsic problem, like it's a carcinogen, or there are other human health issues attached to it, or it's an environmental contaminant, or it's bee toxic, then it shouldn't be approved for use. The UK government has always been opposed to that as a way of regulating pesticides, and they would like to move towards a risk-based system. The risk-based system assumes that whilst these things might be harmful, we can manage that risk effectively. Again, something that has been proven wrong time after time after time over the last, well, since pesticides really started being used after the war. So yes, the loss of the precautionary principle. I already mentioned trade agreements and what that could mean for weakening standards. We've had all the arguments about chlorinated chicken and hormone-fed beef, and well, obviously weakening of pesticide regulations is again something that might come as part and parcel of a trade agreement. We released a report in the middle of last year about that very subject. There are some very worrying things coming from the US and other countries that would say, well, if you want to do a trade agreement with the UK wants to do a trade agreement with us, then they're going to have to meet our requirements on pesticides. And as I've already mentioned, they are, for the most part, much lower than ours, our existing ones under the EU, that is. But it's not all doom and gloom necessarily. There are also some opportunities. So the adoption of more sustainable agriculture, one of the many promises that came out during the, EU referendum debates and following that, is that this is an opportunity for the UK to develop a truly sustainable agriculture. And there's been a lot of talk about it, and we're starting hearing rumours of it, and it really is an opportunity for us to do something special. Whether that will happen or not, we don't know yet. We have linked to that the option of going beyond the EU. So introduce even better regulations. That's a bit of a, well, we'll see if that happens. I don't know if it will. It would be nice if it will. We've had some words from various ministers that that's what we want to do. I think the more likely case is that we will actually continue to be driven by the EU. And this is a case I've made for a long time now, ever since discussions about leaving the EU began. The UK has often been one of the main voices in opposition of more precautionary pesticide measures in the EU. And because of its weight and power in the EU, it often got its way. Without the UK rather blocking such measures, we could see, and I think we will see, the European Union become even more precautionary on pesticides. Introduce more stringent requirements for their approvals. We might see a ban of the use of glyphosate. We might see a complete ban of all the neonics, including the two that are remaining, and various other things like that. And the reality of it is UK farmers have to sell their produce to the EU. We've not got this golden panacea where we've suddenly got these markets that will open up. We don't. We sell most of our agricultural produce to the EU, and that will remain the same. And if we're doing so, we will have to abide by EU requirements, particularly on maximum residue levels. So I can see some positive changes still being driven by the EU, but in a rather sort of backdoor way. We've got a raft of new legislation, which I shall talk about coming, and trade again is sort of in the opportunities as well as the threats. We have got the ability to state what we want within trade deals and to stand firm. I hope that we do, but again, it remains to be seen whether this or seizing governments have got the will or indeed the ability to fight off the large players on the international scene, now that we have gone it alone. So what's the UK planning? Well, we've already got one thing, the agriculture bill. The idea is that sort of change, and these are all things that we've needed to introduce because we're moving away from the EU umbrella. So the agriculture bill, changing the way we farm for the next generation. There were some very bold commitments in it. It was actually a lot better than many of us feared. And one of the main things is replacing the payments for farmers under the Common Agricultural plan, policy, whatever it is, cap. So what do we pay our farmers to do? Well, the idea in the agriculture bill is that we pay farmers public money for public goods, and those public goods are clean air, clean soil, healthy soil, clean water, good food, etc. So that could be a real change, you know, paying farmers to farm in an environmentally sustainable, biodiversity friendly way. We'd like to see. So yeah, changing agriculture. This is something that's going to go ahead. We've got, it's a real opportunity. There are still lots of discussions to be had about how that's implemented, but it's a positive step forward. Then we have the Environment Bill, which is about protecting and enhancing our environment, creating an environmental watchdog that can make sure we're doing things right. Well, that's been put on hold for the time being, discussions around that. But you know, there are some good things in there, setting targets for you know, clean water and increased biodiversity. There's an option. There are options within it that could make it a real useful tool for us going forward. And we have the 25-year environment plan, which is a sort of roadmap for improvement. The goal of sort of helping the natural world regain and retain its health by, you know, introducing measures for more biodiversity, better water quality, how we go about connecting people with nature, making things more sustainable in general. And again, there are some bold statements in there, but at the moment it remains a sort of policy promises with sort of 2 years down the line from when it was introduced, very little actual outcome or action. So for us, the next one is the real big one, the National Action Plan on Pesticides. So what is it? Under the old EU, we had a thing called the Directive on the Sustainable Use of Pesticides. It was actually brought in as a result of the work of Pan and our colleagues in Europe, which was started way back in about 1998, when we thought, well, we've got ways of, you know, there's a regulation for how we approve pesticides, but there isn't anything about how or where we use pesticides. So the Sustainable Use Directive was voted in and came into force in 2009. One of the requirements under that directive was for each member state, which the UK was then, to develop a national action plan, which would show the direction of travel and how it was going to basically plan about using pesticides wherever it was. There were a whole range of different articles in there. That was introduced in 2013, and frankly, it was underwhelming and has remained underwhelming. However, with us leaving the EU, we do need something like that, and because we already have this, rather than reinvent the wheel, we are renegotiating it, changing it, updating it, to meet our future needs. And the government is consulting on the National Action Plan as we speak. It's a public consultation, so I would urge you all to get involved in that if you can. And it closes on the 26th of February. So why is it so important? Well, we're calling for a number of key measures within there that we think will help deal with the pesticide problem. Number one is we want them to set reduction targets for the use of pesticides. It's quite hard to believe that there is no target for reducing pesticide use, no target for reducing the impact of pesticides, nothing clear like that at all. Other member states or other EU countries have adopted such measures, and we think it should be a priority. It needs to be a priority. There are a number of different ways of looking at what a reduction target might be, how it might be delivered, but we would like them to focus on reduction targets for pesticides that cause the most harm to biodiversity, pose the most problems to water and aquatic environments, and pose the most problems to human health. So in reduction targets for them. Coupled with that, we would like them to incorporate, you know, more support for farmers to farm without pesticides, to reduce their pesticides so that they can meet those requirements. specifically looking at, promoting organic, integrated pest management, agroecological farming, etc., and making that the norm. But really establishing and developing proper research and extension services for farmers, so that farmers have the knowledge and the information they need, and they will be supported and encouraged by the government to do so. There are a whole range of other things we want to see within the National Action Plan. And of course, one of those is a ban on non-agricultural pesticides, certainly at least amenity pesticides. And we're working to do that, and we would encourage you all to get involved in that. So, and on that subject, what can you do? Well, you can actually do a lot. Your voice is, is powerful. Well, the government should listen to you. So as I say, the National Action Plan, we have got on our website, and this is the link here, a way for you to take action, to email DEFRA to say that you want something different. Now, our focus for this in particular is on non-agricultural pesticides, because the other organisations like the Wildlife Trust have got things on wider issues to do with agriculture. Nobody is looking at non-agricultural pesticides. So this is the focus on that, although there are opportunities for you to make your voice heard on a wider range of issues. So I would encourage all of you to go to this link, take action on pesticides, tell DEFRA what you think. You've got until the 26th to do this, and it says there the best opportunity in a generation. It really is. This will really influence how and where pesticides are used in the UK. The Environment Bill's ongoing. I would encourage you to keep an eye on us or other organisations who are working on the Environment Bill, who will be asking you to support a variety of amendments, etc., that will be putting forward whilst it's discussed and while it passes through Parliament. So there's nothing happening at the moment. As I say, it's been sort of put on hold probably for 6 months. There is a consultation on gene editing at the moment. You might like to have a look at that. I have a suspicion that the application for a Neonic Derogation was actually a thinly veiled way of making gene editing and GM in general look more acceptable to the public going forward. But again, we'll see if that happens. So I'd also encourage you to have a look at that and do that. But on a personal level, you can always do things, and you can do these anytime you like. So you can garden and grow food or plants, etc., without pesticides. You don't need them in your garden. You don't need them in your allotment. So we've got a really useful guide available for free on our website about how to garden without pesticides. Buy organic, buy more organic at the supermarket. Show support that this is what you want, but also tell your supermarkets that that's what you want. That would be great. Just on both of these, we will be in the very near future, launching a campaign asking people to write to the big supermarkets to ask them to stop selling pesticides on their supermarket shelves. So the glyphosates and the bug clears, etc. We don't believe that there's any need for that, and we'd like to see them stop it. So again, that's something you can look out for on our website. I can maybe supply the link for you later. You can start join our Pesticide-Free Towns campaign. As I mentioned earlier, we've been running this for some time now. We've got hundreds of people all over the country in various places who are running their own campaigns. We've got sort of 40 plus, maybe as many as 80 actually, councils who are either stopping, reducing, or doing something about pesticide use in their towns. We've got a whole range of resources on our website. All of it is free for you to use. We can hook you up with already existing campaigns in your area. We can advise you on how to start your own campaign, and we can give you lots of support. There's loads of information on our website about that. And the last thing is really just spread the word. So when you see things, spread it on Twitter. Talk to people about pesticides. Talk to people about why you buy organic or garden without pesticides or whatever it is. But yeah, spread the word. Pesticides are often a bit of a niche issue, and people don't often realise, the pervasiveness of them, or the effects or impacts of them, or in fact that we can do perfectly well without them. So yeah, spread the word. But taking personal action is something we can all do. We can all do it on a daily basis. And I think that's about, yeah, it's about half an hour. So I shall say thank you. That's our website there, or you can drop me an email at the address there. So thank you all.
Thank you, Nick. That was really interesting. Personally, I've certainly learnt a lot, and I think in particular the fact that we're poisoning any part of wildlife, regardless of whether it's insects or anything else, is quite baffling to me. As you can imagine, we've got lots and lots of questions, so I'll rattle through them as sort of quickly as I can. If you do have any more questions, anyone in sort of the audience, please feel free to enter them into the chat. As I've mentioned previously, we've got about sort of half an hour or so to get through them, so hopefully we'll get as many answered as possible. So the first question for you is, does PAN recognise that gene editing cut and paste technology is distinct from GM and should be authorised for use by plant breeders in the UK?
Thanks. We don't support gene editing, mainly because we don't believe it will necessarily reduce the use of pesticides. We don't believe that it's necessary to replace traditional plant breeding techniques. And we are concerned that not enough is known about it to push for the deregulation that seems to be on the agenda. So again, the approach seems to be ignoring the precautionary principle, and it's far too early to even think about deregulating it at the moment. More work needs to be done, but again, we fail to see. It's one of those technologies like GM. You know, it's probably an unwanted technology for an unneeded problem. It would be our opinion, but it remains to be seen. But certainly it would be foolish to deregulate at the moment.
Fair enough. The second question from the same person. So does PAN support the use of biopesticides, i.e. fungi, bacteria and viruses, to control crop pests and diseases, thereby replacing chemical treatments?
Yes, biopesticides are an interesting product, development. And yes, we do support biopesticides and their development. There are some issues with them. They need to have stringent regulatory toxicological testing because, you know, at the same time they are being introduced into the environment. But for the most part, these are not novel or new chemicals. These are things that we already know well about. We know what they do. We know how they work. So yes, we support biopesticides. Yes, we support measures that would allow certainly small and medium enterprises who are working on biopesticides to get through the regulatory system, potentially with reduced costs. And no, we don't support them having a weaker regulatory system or risk assessment than other pesticides because they are still going out into the environment and doing things. But yes, we are supportive of them.
Sounds positive. Do we not have to accept the lower yields as a cost of less pesticides, but the benefit to nature that it will recover is sort of worth doing?
Yeah, yes, yeah. That's a fairly simple yes/no question. I think there are some interesting questions about yields in general and how we measure yields, and I think it's wrong. You know, we have for years and years and years measured a farmer's success on his yield, and that's ridiculous. We need to change that. We need to start looking at farmers' incomes as measures of success rather than yield, and we don't need to keep chasing these growing yields. You know, it's not about that, and look at the harms that are associated with us chasing yields. So yes, I think it's a reasonable payoff, but it's no reason why farmers' incomes needs to suffer as a result of it. In fact, you know, they should improve.
So do you think with sort of the fact that income might reduce, that the government should sort of subsidise that in any way?
Well, there's, I mean, we spoke to many farmers that their income doesn't reduce. In fact, their income goes up because they're paying less for various inputs. And, you know, it's obviously pointed out, pesticides aren't cheap. They cost money. But however, one thing we do think, you know, farmers are in a very difficult position. We've spoken to many over the years. They are, you know, being squeezed by retailers to keep their prices low. The public expects cheap food, or has been led to expect cheap food, and they've, you know, they're on very, very tight margins. So it's very difficult for them to make changes. So yes, there should be actually government support to help farmers reduce their pesticide use and make up any shortfall while they're learning new techniques or transitioning. But yeah, yeah.
Fair enough. And the next question is, how do we get politicians to engage with the issue? What can we do? I know you touched on this in the end of your presentation.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working on this for a long time, and I actually think that there has been a change. There has been a change of attitude, not across the board, but quite a healthy change in terms of interest and concern for the environment and biodiversity, and an understanding that pesticides are an issue. I mean, as I say, we've still got a long way to go, but I think they are listening. You know, we're seeing language in legislation that reflects some of the issues of pesticides. We were quite surprised by some of the inclusions in the National Action Plan consultation document. I mean, language that we thought we would probably never see come from a government. So I think they are starting to listen, but one of the ways it is by joining in things like the Take Action thing for the National Action Plan and submitting your thoughts to DEFRA, writing to your MPs, writing to relevant members of Parliament, that sort of thing. That's important, but also for smaller issues. So, you know, go and talk to your local council and councillors and get them to stop using pesticides in your town. That also filters up. So once we've got, you know, more towns and cities not using pesticides, there's a very clear message that this is what people want, and, you know, what do politicians listen to? They people who vote for them. So yeah, you can influence them in a number of ways, and I think they are starting to listen. But it needs concerted effort. So yeah, fill in all the things that you can, send all the emails that you can, you know, get involved, and don't feel that your voice is sort of a lone voice in the wilderness.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can say on a personal note that it's fantastic to see the amount of support and sort of community, sort of from a digital media perspective. So I'll just reiterate, you are not alone, and there is a lot of advice out there and sort of support from different people. So the next question is, will we see food prices increase if we use less pesticides, as food production will be affected?
That's really hard to say, isn't it? I mean, food prices are potentially, you know, artificially low. You know, farmers that use pesticides, huge amounts of pesticides and nitrates, well, they're not really paying, you know, we're not really paying the full price of that, you know, for all the pollution and the loss and everything. You know, there's a sort of artificial subsidy in there. Yeah, food prices might rise. They may well rise. But we have no right to demand a £2.50 chicken or whatever. I think that's, you know, if the price, the cost of protecting our environment, protecting our water, increasing our biodiversity is a rise in food price, I think it's a price worth paying. But then, as I say, food prices have been kept artificially low. Retailers have to stop doing these 2-for-1s and all this sort of thing. They're loss leaders. It's part of what's got us into this situation in the first place.
Yeah, I think the environmental cost needs to be sort of allowed within sort of food costs.
Factor into it, absolutely. And if that were factored into it, then it would be a lot more expensive.
Yeah. So on a sort of different note, how does the National Pollinator Strategy fill in with this National Action Plan on pesticides?
It doesn't really. Parts of it do. It's a sort of standalone thing. Again, they're actually going through a bit of a revamp at the moment as well to see where they go for the next 5 years. We hope that they will take the issue of pesticides more seriously. At the moment, it's and they, you know, they do great work on the areas that it's been involved with, which is mainly sort of habitat issues and that sort of thing. So we hope they will focus more on pesticide issues as they go ahead. But we welcome the National Pollinator Strategy. We think it could be stronger, and we hope it will be.
Brilliant. It all sounds positive. And
I try. We have to have a bit of positivity, don't we?
yeah, it's always good at the end of a Thursday evening. Should we be looking to strike a balance between maintaining the registration of sufficient activities to allow farmers and growers to do their job, whilst ensuring that the incentives still exist to develop more sustainable means of pest control? So, where would PAN sit on a sort of a balance between the two?
I think we should be, as I say, we need to have a reduction target. I don't buy this argument. I mean, I understand there are issues about resistance and whatnot, but that's come from overuse. We need to be phasing out the pesticides that are causing the greatest harm to our environment, and that needs to be done. And farmers need help to adopt non-chemical control methods.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So it has been mooted that GM modified crops would be the answer to no pesticides. What is PAN's stand on this? Obviously, we've touched on different sort of alternatives.
GM modified crops have not delivered on any of the promises that have been made for them over the years. They are, as I said before, they are an unwanted solution to a non-existent problem. They've not reduced the use of pesticides. In fact, they've increased the use of herbicides in many places where they're used. So we're now seeing glyphosate-resistant weeds across the US. We've seen some in the UK as well. GM is just it's a nonsense, frankly. It's got no role in reducing pesticides. It won't reduce pesticides. It is, we don't need it. It hasn't delivered. We don't need it. It's time to say goodbye and end the experiment.
That's fair enough. So someone said that they understand that Riverford, there's increased demand for organic food that isn't currently being matched by an increase in organic farming. So there's just not sort of there's the demand, but not the sourcing. What can be done to help farmers support this conversion?
Yeah, I mean, be a better coming for the Soil Association answer to that, but I think we need more assistance to help farmers convert to organic in the first place. How they go about that, how they get the appropriate certification, etc. And I think there has to be some kind of system to help farmers who are in conversion to benefit from doing that, because that's often the bit that causes the problem. It's that little bit in the middle, so where you don't really get the benefits of being organic, and yet you're sort of potentially reducing yield or having all these other problems while you're still getting used to it. So I think there needs to be more support from all sectors, actually. So I know we need government support to help farmers convert to organic, but the retailers also have a part to play in this as well. They wield a lot of power, they have a lot of influence. So if they could support farmers to do that, so much the better.
From all levels, basically.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions on a similar note to do with supermarkets and garden centres. What are they doing anything to stop pesticides, and are PAN doing anything to sort of address the fact that a lot of them still sell and promote glyphosate?
Yes, yeah, okay. Yeah, so PAN does, was it last year? Yeah, because the year before last, we did a supermarket survey looking at the 10 biggest retailers in the UK. And where they stand on pesticides for a whole range of different things. So about using, toxic pesticides throughout their supply chains to selling pesticides on their shelves, etc. And you can see that on the PAN website. We'll be doing an updated version again this year. And some of them are doing some good work. Some of them aren't doing such good work, but all of them are engaged. Yes, and we're launching a campaign. I think it's next week or the week after. World Wildlife Day, might be the 4th of March. Details will be available on our website, though. Asking people to write to their supermarkets and take things off the shelves. We know that some have stopped selling glyphosate. We know that some have taken neonicotinoids, or the ones that are approved, off their shelves. We want them to go further. You don't need to buy a herbicide while you buy your loaf of bread. It's just ridiculous. And also it doesn't make up much of their sales. They can just take them off the shelves. And we're urging those members of the public to get involved with that and ask them to do it. They will listen if enough people say it.
Sounds like a good action, and I look forward to seeing those resources on your website. So what someone's asked, what's the link between suicide rates and pesticides?
A lot of it is about access to something that will kill you. So I mentioned very specifically the use of paraquat, herbicide that is banned in the EU. Paraquat, even ingesting a small amount, is for the most part fatal and irreversible once it's gone in. A lot of, I mean, this is research from Edinburgh University. They've looked at this. You know, a lot of the suicides are not actual attempts at suicide, but you know, you can't reverse paraquat poisoning once it's happened. And access, there are also accidental poisonings as well. So yeah, so they estimate that we could halve suicide numbers just by getting rid of paraquat. And it is a hideous double standard that Syngenta make and export paraquat from the UK to other countries around the world who have lax or not as good regulatory systems. And it's allowing people to be poisoned, and that also needs to stop.
Short and sweet, simple, needs to stop. So we've got quite a few queries about the recent decision by the government to allow the neonicotinoids on sugar beet crops, which some of you may have heard of. And quite a few people are asking, what's your stance on it? What do you think they're okay? And sort of questions like that.
Do I think what's okay? The derogation?
No, yes, yeah. The derogation, the decision to use the neonicotinoids.
Yeah, it was ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. It shows the power of the sugar lobby, British Sugar. It was promoted and supported by the National Farmers Union, who were always opposed to the ban on neonics. Yeah, an emergency. I mean, to be honest, it probably won't go ahead because this cold snap has probably killed off the threat of aphids completely. So it probably won't go ahead anyway. But just approving it just sends the wrong message. I mean, it's for sugar beet, which, you know, sort of, we've got sugar taxes, we've got problems with obesity. We don't really want to be producing more cheap sugar, but there is a monopoly on sugar, so you know, they're very keen to maintain production. And it's not as if, you know, this has come as a surprise. You know, there's been temporary ban since 2013, a complete ban since 2018. I would be interested to know how much effort has been put into trying to find a replacement for these 4 sugar beet farmers, even if it's needed. The whole thing was a farce, frankly. And as I say, I do have a feeling that it was just well, if you don't want these derogations to go ahead in future, then we should have gene editing or similar, because that will do it. And I think it's part of a longer game potentially. But yeah, and then I don't think it's because we left the EU. I do find it surprising, because actually the UK government's been pretty good on not allowing emergency authorisations up to this point. So it's potentially worrying. It wasn't a one-off. Some of the proposed amelioration measures were just outrageous. I mean, you know, to stop pollinators coming in and feeding on these, you know, or coming and getting polluted. It was advised that farmers use herbicides to kill the wild flowering plants around them. So, I mean, really? So, okay, so you're planting these with toxic pesticides that can travel and persist in the environment, and then you want to kill all the flowers as well. I mean, the whole thing was crazy. And I hope they've seen. I hope that the government have seen the strength of public support. I hope that they've seen the science behind the fact that we don't need to allow these derogations, and I hope they listen in future and don't permit them again.
Yeah, so, well, from a wildlife perspective, we can certainly say that we don't agree with the derogation, and that we've had a lot of support from sort of Devon residents and sort of beyond, from just say that this is not necessary. On your note about the sort of effects of the sort of winter on aphids and whether sort of the derogation goes ahead, if anyone's interested in that, we'll be keeping everyone updated on our social media channels and on our website as well. So depending on the outcome of sort of the weather and sort of whether the sort of decision is goes ahead, we'll be keeping you updated on that. The next question is, Are there non-organic foods you would avoid because of pesticides? I've heard strawberries are sprayed a lot.
There is. We've actually got lists up on our website in our food section that analyses the UK government annual residue testing data that will give you an idea of the ones that you might like to avoid. Not everything's as bad as everything else. The problem is you can't actually pick up a piece of fruit and see whether there's a pesticide residue on it. So I'd recommend having a look at our website and seeing what's what. But yeah, sort of apples, pears, grapes, imported grapes are often citrus are often the worst offenders in terms of pesticide residues and multiple pesticide residues, because it's often not just one pesticide on there, but a cocktail of pesticides.
Avoid all fruit then.
That's definitely not our message. Fruit is good for you.
Go for organic fruit.
Yeah, go for organic, but do eat fruit as well. Whatever, yeah.
So we've got about 5 minutes left before sort of 7 o'clock and before we're sort of due to end the talk. So I'll go through a few more questions. Just to say to everyone that we will be sort of sending you an email to those who signed up for the event with a link to this recording, and also try and respond to the questions that we might not have got through today. So the next one is, what is the CEE bill and sort of how does it relate?
That, I'm afraid, is not an area that I'm particularly involved in, so I'm going to have to pass on that question.
Fair enough. Is it realistic that we can grow totally without pesticides?
That is a good question. At the moment, no, probably not. We've done far too much damage to the support systems that will be needed to have a completely organic system. We have reduced insect numbers, we've reduced beneficial predators, we've reduced bird species that would keep pests off. We've created these sort of monoculture deserts. We've lost the various wildflowers and pollinators. So no, not immediately, not overnight. We wouldn't. It's going to take an awful lot of rebuilding of nature to be able to do that. But it's something we should be thinking about aiming at. Certainly, we should be aiming to massively increase the amount of organic agriculture in the UK, which currently sits at about 4%, as opposed to some European countries have got 10% upwards, and I think the EU's goal is to have 30% of organic agriculture, land under organic agriculture by 2030. We need some ambitious goals for organic, and we need to start repairing our ecosystems that would help support organic agriculture as well. And we can't they have to work in tandem. It should certainly be a goal, but it's sadly, it's not going to happen overnight.
But there's a road to recovery, and there's certainly a roadmap created by Pesticide Action Network, and we've obviously got a lot of advice on our own website as well.
Yeah, and we have got a long way to go, but I think we can certainly, if we set that up as our goal, if we set targets, if we really make this a priority, if we make nature and biodiversity a priority, and look at doing this properly, and there's the political will to follow it through and the public support for it, then we can do it, but it will take some time.
Fair enough. So the next question is, will IPM produce the same yields at a similar cost? If it does, why are we not using them now? If not, how are we going to keep pace with our ever-growing population?
Yeah, it can, and it does. It's been shown in France that you can, and actually from some studies over in the UK as well. This was quite a while back, but I think Robinson put out a figure that if we actually adopted proper integrated pest management for our arable crops, we could reduce the use of pesticides by 30% overnight with things that we already know about, without reducing yield or income for farmers. We've seen similar experiences in France with various crop sectors. We can make significant pesticide reductions, no impact on yield, no impact on farmer income. In fact, farmer income goes up because they're no longer paying for inputs. The reason we don't do it is because it's very poorly understood in the UK. It's very poorly supported. It's just not talked about very well. The information is there, and some farmers are doing amazing work, but there really just isn't the support and the information in general for it. And there are issues with agronomic advice in the UK. You know, the vast majority of agronomists are linked to pesticide companies who work for pesticide distributors and make their money from commission on sales of pesticides and other inputs. There is a lack of properly independent advice for farmers. There's a lack of support from retailers for them to change things, a lack of support from the public, and there's a lack of support from the government. So that all needs to come together to help farmers change things for the better. But it can and does work.
Yep, well, fantastic. Yeah, I certainly agree. And the final question for this evening is, will PAN and DWT work together to promote the link to any PAN consultation? I think I can answer that one. Certainly we will sort of promote anything that sort of helps sort of take action for insects. So this is a bit of a plug, but if you want to go to our website and our Take Action page, if you have a look at our Action for Insects page, it has a lot of advice about sort of essentially what we can do to reduce pesticide use, but also a lot of links to the Pesticide Action Network website and sort of guidance. I'd just like to say a really big thank you to you, Nick. It's not an easy subject, and I certainly have learnt a lot today. I mean, even the statistics were just astounding to me, and I've sort of been doing quite a lot of work on this particular subject. So I'd like to thank everyone else for coming to this event and for your many questions. As I mentioned, we do plan on sending an email out to you afterwards, and hopefully we'll be able to address some of the questions in that email. If you haven't already done so, please take 5 minutes or so to respond to the National Action Plan, where you can submit your own views and how you think UK pesticide use should change. There's a link to the Wildlife Trust action page where you can respond to the consultation really easily, and you can find that link on our Devon Wildlife Trust homepage. The consultation ends next week on the 26th of February, and this sort of NAP plan only gets reviewed every 5 years or so, so it's a really important opportunity for us to have some impact. And of course, spread the word, so please feel free to share the link with your peers and friends, and I hope you enjoyed the event. If you enjoyed sort of our online events so far, please take a look at our What's On page on our website, as there are lots more to come. And I'd like to say thanks again to Nick, and good evening to you all.
Thanks.